How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be talking about Marvel's Moon Knight. This is from 2022 and of course is streaming on Disney+. The show was created by Doug Moench and stars Oscar Isaac, May Calamawy, and Ethan Hawke, and is of course based on the Marvel Comics character. In this show, we meet Stephen Grant. He's a nerdy little low-level museum employee, but strange things starts to happen to him. He's sleepwalking, he's losing time, people tell him he did things that he doesn't remember doing, and he finds out that he has a split personality. Mark Spector. Mark Spector is an American, but he's also a really tough mercenary guy, and he's also the servant of Khonshu, the moon god, and he can transform into the superhero Moon Knight. And he's going to be fighting this cult that wants to raise an Egyptian deity and, start to judge the world. And overall, there's a lot to like with this series. It definitely does have major faults, though, but it did wind up growing on me, especially towards the end when all the plot elements started to come together and things started to work. It's only a 6-episode run, so it's not very long, but I did like where it was going towards the end, but then it's over, and the weird thing with Moon Knight and what people are kind of talking about is this one, Marvel says, is a limited series, not a season 1, and they say that this might be the only Moon Knight thing that they ever do. And do I believe that? Not 100%. I won't say what they are, but things happen later in the show that I'm like, okay, if this is one season, why are you introducing this so late in the game? If you didn't have a plan to do a season 2, why are we throwing out all this stuff at the last minute? But also, like I said, I was just towards the end of the show, really getting into it, really liking where it was going, and if it ends here, if this is all we get of Moon Knight, that kind of sucks, because he was just kind of starting to come into his own as a character, and it was really starting to work, and if that was it, then yeah, no, I'd want more with this character. I do like that this sort of, going their own direction, they were trying to do their own story, they were trying to carve out their own little corner of the MCU, and they weren't really caring about being big and interconnected with 20 other movies. And I do think the MCU needs to focus on smaller individual stories, but I don't think that means we need to just say, there's Moon Knight, it's done, ignore it forever now, I would like to see more with the character. I would like to see some sort of Dark Avengers, I would like to see more, but I do like the effort to make an individual project. I thought that was pretty important. But anyway, let's talk about a few of the specifics. Moon Knight himself as a character, he's pretty cool. I do like the Moon Knight design. It's pretty much his comic design, but they gave him more bandages and made him seem more like a mummy, which I thought that was a cool way to reincorporate the Egyptian element. And when he's out there, when he's fighting, it does seem pretty cool. Now, he does seem to be almost invincible. He'll take several bullets, several stabbings, and I'm like, okay, so when he's Moon Knight, can he not be defeated or something? I don't know. But in turn, they do kind of scale back how much you see of Moon Knight himself. And maybe this is just the juvenile part of my brain, but I was like, he's in there enough, but I kind of wanted to see more Moon Knight, and especially for the first few episodes, you don't really get to see too much of Moon Knight himself, plenty of Oscar Isaac, but I'm like, break out the suit more, do more cool superhero things. And I guess we should talk about that, the split personality element. I did like, it's two different versions of himself, and they are very different, where, if they weren't really showing you them back to back, it would almost seem like a completely different actor. And I do like how Oscar Isaac would switch between the two personalities, sometimes very quickly and sometimes even in the same shot, and that was really impressive, and I did like to see, it's the same guy as two different personalities, but they have to learn to become friends and learn to trust each other better. And I thought that was a clever way of going about it, learning to be friends with yourself. And that's pretty interesting. But there is a problem, and that is with Stephen Grant, the nerdy British one. He's kind of funny, and I guess some people would really like him, but he is so nerdy and, so inept a lot of the times that I found myself in the beginning parts wishing that they would just switch to Mark. Mark was the cool, the capable one, and it seemed like in the beginning, Stephen was kind of slowing the plot down. Also, Stephen in the beginning, he didn't know about Moon Knight, and focusing so much on him rather than Mark is part of the reason why we don't get more Moon Knight in the beginning. Like, the first episode, you only see Moon Knight for a few shots towards the end, and, well, maybe a few other little places, but it's really not big into Moon Knight in the first episode, and that is because primarily they focus on Stephen. Now, Stephen, when the two learn to work together, he does become a more capable character, and when you see him figuring things out, he does get better, but it took you till episode 5 of 6 to really get this guy, and I felt that, he did slow the plot down a little bit at the beginning. I was much more concerned with Mark. I just wanted him to be Mark most of the time. But whatever. They also introduce, later on in the series, a second, new environment. And it does do a lot. It does introduce new characters. But at the same time, it does kind of come out of nowhere. And it does feel like, hey, the A plot's really chugging along. Well, now we gotta go do this B plot. And it does, it needs to be there to explain a lot of the backstory. And it does help you understand who Stephen is. And it does introduce other characters. In particular, this one really interesting one. But it just does kind of come out of nowhere. And it kind of takes a story down the other path, towards the end of it, when you're really getting invested in what's going on. And I feel that it would have been better if this second environment was actually a framing mechanism. You could have introduced, the whole Stephen backstory thing earlier on in the series. It wouldn't have felt derailed as much. And you could cut this part as a framing mechanism, and it would have worked a lot smoother, I feel. So yeah, it is interesting, but it does kind of feel like it derails the momentum, putting it all in this one chunk at the end. Also, I know that, I'm not the biggest Moon Knight comic fan, but I know a lot of the newer comics frame it as you don't know if the Egyptian gods are real, and Moon Knight might just be completely crazy. This doesn't do that. In this show, the Egyptian gods are 100% real, and it does go into big Egyptian crazy magic stuff. And overall, I did find the magic was entertaining, but to the people that want the more nuanced approach, that really isn't in here. It does get kind of big and cartoony, especially a few things that happen towards the end. But this is the MCU. We've already seen crazy magic stuff. It would be kind of weird to say, maybe, no, it's all in his head, it's all low-key, so that is kind of the way it's portrayed in the show, but you do get some interesting elements, like, the character Khonshu, the Egyptian god that he serves, is a really interesting character. He has a big bird skull head, And they really lean into that. Like, you know, if it was just superhero movies of like 10 years ago, I feel they would have really downgraded the character design, made him seem more realistic. But they're like, no, big bird head, we're going for it. And I did like that element of the show. They really leaned into him. He has a really good voice. And his character, the idea of he wants to accomplish his goal, which is generally a good thing, but he doesn't care how much he has to abuse Mark and Steven to do it. And it's like, okay, you're on the side of good, but are you really on my side? And I thought that was interesting. And like I said, they did play him up as kind of a horror character when you first see him. You know, Steven doesn't know who this guy is, so you see Bird Skeleton Man, you're gonna freak out. And there was some horror elements in here. In particular, the villain has this glass scene. It's like the first shot of the show. And there is a scene later on where someone gets killed, and it's a little more graphic than Marvel usually does. But that being said, when I had heard about this show, some people said, oh, Moon Knight, he's like Marvel's Batman. And I really didn't get that impression. More than the Batman movies, this felt more like a Brendan Fraser mummy movie, which isn't a bad thing. But I was kind of expecting a darker, more horror-based show. I was expecting, you know, it to be a little gritty and Batman-esque. And we do get some of those elements, but it is more a fun action-adventure show. And like I said, more Brendan Fraser mummy than Batman. So, you know, expect that tone going in as well. We also do get the love interest, Layla. And she's pretty cool as well. But yeah, it kind of does feel like a mummy character. But she's your, you know, level-headed action-adventure tough girl. But I do like she knows Mark first, and then finding out about the Steven persona and figuring out how she feels about the other version of this character. I did think that was interesting. You know, this guy you know is a tough guy. Turns out he has this little British Museum guy in his head, and you have to figure out how to deal with his other half, you know. So I thought that was interesting, and they do cool stuff with her towards the end. The biggest flaw, though, I think, the villain, it's your standard Marvel villain problem. They don't let their villains be as big and over the top. Like, you know, the villain here, Glass Shoe Man, I don't know his real name. The most memorable thing, the first time you see him, he's putting little bits of glass in his shoe and walking around with them, and that's like what I remember the most about him. He has this Minority Report plan to judge criminals before they've committed their crimes, and I mean, we've seen that before in Minority Report, so it's not super original, and they do some interesting stuff with him, but like, he gets a power boost towards the end and doesn't even get a cool new suit, you know, and he's just another so-so Marvel villain. I really wish that Marvel would make their villains bigger, more menacing, more original looking, but they're either kind of forgettable or clones of the main hero. It's only a few times, like with Thanos or Loki, you know, or, you know, you don't really get enough variety in the villains, you know, and he's your kind of forgettable B-villain there, you know, so I wish he was better. I wish they allowed him to do something more and different. So yeah, he's not the best. So the villain is kind of so-so, focusing so much on Steven at the beginning really does limit how much we see Moon Knight at the beginning, and I do wish that Moon Knight himself was on screen more and we got more action with him. I wish the show was a little darker and grittier, and I felt like by the time it really got going, it was over, and I'm hoping that this isn't just a limited series, because I feel like the characters are set up good enough now that we could go out and have a really fun season 2. But they say it's a limited series, they say that's all it is. I don't know, but I guess we'll see. Anyway, good, but has some faults, but overall I did like it. Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should be my TV show playlist. I'm trying to work harder on covering the shows that I'm watching. In this playlist, I've talked about primarily anthology horror. This is actually the first Marvel show that I've covered. But I've talked about things like Netflix's Love, Death, and Robots. I talked about Shining Vale, that just came out recently. So there is some more stuff here, but this is primarily horror TV. Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Relevant playlist on the bottom. Have a good day now.